Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We all know artificial intelligence doesn't actually live in a magical digital cloud, right?
Well, it certainly appears that way to most people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a given that when you prompt an AI, that request travels to a massive data center somewhere.
Somewhere very physical.
You understand that it takes physical servers and, massive amounts of electricity.
Right, from the local power grid.
But today's sources point to a completely different silent dependency.
One that is being heavily overlooked by almost everyone in the tech industry.
We're looking at a set of analytical notes today on civilization structures,
Alongside a really deeply researched thesis on AI infrastructure.
known as the N7 thesis.
That's the one.
And the mission for this deep dive is to map out the physical, earthly constraints of this tech.
The constraints that are quietly dictating its entire future.
We want to shatter that illusion for you, the illusion that AI is just weightless and digital.
Because we aren't just talking about electrical power today.
No, we are talking about the thermal limits of the planet itself.
The sources essentially force us to look past all those daily headlines about new algorithms.
Or, faster chips.
Right. We need to observe the underlying structural shift required to actually support those advancements.
Okay, let's unpack this. We interact with AI on our screens, so we naturally assume its expansion just means writing more code.
Like it's just pure information processing.
Yeah. But thinking of AI as just software is like looking at a skyscraper and thinking it's only made of glass.
Completely ignoring the massive steel foundation buried in the dirt.
Exactly. It needs a physical base to exist.
And the N7 thesis introduces this through a framework they call the civilization stack.
Which is a dependency chain.
A strict, unforgiving physical dependency chain. We tend to analyze technology as if it exists in a vacuum.
But it doesn't.
No, it sits at the very top of this stack. The foundational layer is the planet.
Because the planet provides the raw conditions.
Right, and the planet dictates energy.
Which then allows for infrastructure.
And only at the top of that infrastructure do you finally get AI.
So every time you generate an image or ask an AI to write an email for you,
You are physically interacting with that heavy infrastructure.
the immediate physical manifestation of AI's expansion is just data centers.
A rapid, massive proliferation of them.
But why is the physical infrastructure expanding so drastically? I mean, can't chips just get smaller and faster?
They do. But AI requires massive, intense computation.
And computation has a physical cost.
Yes. The unavoidable physical reality of computation is that it produces heat.
Because of the electrical resistance, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're pushing electrical currents through billions of microscopic transistors,
Billions of times per second.
and that encounters resistance. And what's fascinating here is that heat isn't just a minor glitch.
It's a massive structural hurdle.
At the scale of AI, this heat accumulates rapidly. AI computation literally burns hot.
It's like a car spinning its tires in the mud.
That's a good way to look at it.
The engine is redlining, doing an immense amount of work to calculate your prompt.
But the immediate physical byproduct of all that friction is just raw, destructive heat.
So what happens if they don't manage it?
If that thermal energy isn't actively stripped away, the silicon chips will literally degrade and melt within seconds.
Wow. Within seconds.
Yes. The servers are packed so tight, running relentlessly at maximum capacity.
So you just cool it down, right? Pump in some air conditioning.
Standard industrial air conditioning completely fails at this density.
Because air can't hold enough heat.
Right. Air has a very low thermal capacity.
So blowing cold air over an AI server rack is useless.
It's like trying to put out a campfire with a desk fan. It just cannot carry the thermal energy away fast enough.
So they have to use a different medium.
They do.
And here's where it gets really interesting. They don't just use air. The sources reveal they use water.
Vast, staggering amounts of water.
Like they are literally pumping water into the server rooms.
Yes, directly through cold plates attached to the silicon chips themselves.
Because water is dense?
Incredibly dense. It acts like a thermal sponge.
So there's this invisible sequential conversion chain happening inside the facility.
Compute leads to heat,
Heat requires cooling.
and cooling requires water.
It's almost like a giant steam engine running in reverse.
That is the perfect analogy.
Because instead of using water to create energy,
It uses energy to create computation,
which creates heat.
which then requires massive amounts of water to keep from melting down.
So the water absorbs the heat from the chips. What happens to it then?
You end up with a closed loop of boiling hot water.
That has to be dumped somewhere.
Right, it's sent to massive cooling towers outside the facility,
where it gets sprayed downwards.
while large fans blow ambient air across it.
And that causes evaporation, right?
Yes, evaporative cooling. A portion of that water absorbs so much heat that it undergoes a phase change
It turns into vapor.
and carries the heat out into the atmosphere.
So the water isn't just circulating infinitely in a closed pipe.
No, it is being actively consumed.
It's literally boiling off into the sky.
Every time the AI does heavy mental work, physical water evaporates.
Water here is not just a raw material.
It is functioning as crucial thermal infrastructure.
It's as vital to the AI as the electricity is.
Exactly.
To give you a sense of scale, researchers estimate that for roughly every 10 to 50 prompts you type in,
The data center evaporates about 500 milliliters of water,
that is a standard plastic water bottle
just disappearing into the sky.
for just a few prompts. Now multiply that by hundreds of millions of users every day.
The volume is astronomical.
If AI fundamentally relies on water to cool its servers, then more AI means what?
It guarantees an exponential growth in water demand
We usually think electricity as the main cost of computing.
because electricity has a visible price tag.
Yeah, but water is usually treated as a given, like it's just there.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, water is not evenly distributed across the planet.
It really isn't. So that transforms water from an invisible utility into a hard geographic constraint.
The sources describe this as a new compound pressure.
A compound pressure. What are the variables?
It's an equation. Water multiplied by energy, multiplied by infrastructure, multiplied by state.
So all four have to align perfectly.
For AI to function at scale in any given location, yes.
But wait, let me challenge that premise. Tech companies have virtually infinite capital, right?
They're worth trillions of dollars, sure.
So if a region has cheap power but no water, why can't they just engineer their way out of this?
How do you mean?
Like, could they build their own desalination plants? Or use closed-loop refrigerants that don't evaporate?
The barrier to those alternatives is, ironically, the energy layer of the stack.
Because desalination requires huge amounts of electricity.
Massive amounts to force seawater through reverse osmosis membranes.
And closed-loop refrigerant systems.
They require massive amounts of electricity to run the heavy compressors.
Oh, and the data centers are already maxing out the local power grids?
Exactly. Just to run the computation itself.
So adding a desalination plant would cripple the grid entirely.
It would. Evaporative cooling isn't just a choice. It's an economic and energetic necessity.
They are offloading the cooling burden from the power grid onto the local water supply.
They are trading water to save electricity.
Wow. And because water is heavy and expensive to move, it's a hard geographic constraint.
You can transmit data globally in milliseconds,
And you can transmit electricity across regional grids.
but you cannot easily pipe millions of gallons of water across a continent to cool a server farm.
Which brings us back to that compound pressure equation: water, energy, infrastructure, and state.
Right.
We understand water, energy, and infrastructure. But what does state mean here?
State refers to the regulatory and political governance of resources.
Like local government regulations.
Yes. Even if a region has a river and a power plant, the state dictates who gets access to them.
Local municipal water boards issue the permits.
Zoning laws dictate where a facility can be built.
And drought declarations can legally throttle industrial water usage.
The political layer is the final gatekeeper of the physical layer.
Because if an AI facility is evaporating millions of gallons, it's in direct resource competition.
Severe competition with local agriculture, manufacturing, and basic human living requirements.
You drop a massive, thirsty industrial facility into an area that relies on a local reservoir.
And when that reservoir drops by 20% during a summer heat wave, the political backlash is immediate.
The state variable becomes a localized bottleneck.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for the listener? What's the bottom line here?
It means the entire future map of where AI lives is fundamentally changing.
It's a major paradigm shift.
The placement of AI infrastructure is no longer being determined by computational capacity.
It's being determined by cooling possibility.
AI will be forced to cluster wherever the water is.
Wait, so even though the internet is everywhere, the physical engines of AI cannot be built in water-scarce regions.
They cannot sustainably exist there, no.
You can access an AI from a desert in Nevada,
Or from a high-rise in Dubai.
but the physical reality of the data center can't be there?
Building massive AI infrastructure in an arid region is physically and economically unviable.
Because of the sheer volume of water required for thermal management?
Companies will be forced to retreat to cooler, Water-rich climates.
which fundamentally alters the geopolitical distribution of computational power.
Yes, it shifts the entire map.
Tracing this line from a piece of code all the way down to a local reservoir dropping in volume really shatters the illusion of the cloud.
It completely reframes how we look at the technology.
We started this deep dive looking at the assumption that AI is just weightless information processing,
And by applying the N7 thesis, we moved past the software layer.
down to the dirt. We looked at the intense physics of modern computation
The inevitable buildup of heat caused by electrical resistance,
and the thermodynamic requirement to extract that heat,
which led us to evaporative cooling towers.
and the massive continuous consumption of physical water as thermal infrastructure,
Finally, we explored the compound pressure equation.
showing how local water rights and state regulations create a hard geographic constraint.
The true limit of AI is shifting right before our eyes.
From computing performance to earthly resources.
And this raises an important question.
While everyone focuses on the race to secure faster chips and build bigger models,
They may be ignoring the more restrictive bottleneck.
the actual battleground for AI dominance might not be algorithmic efficiency at all.
It might be cooling infrastructure and water access.
It leaves you with a very real, very physical question to consider.
As this AI expansion continues relentlessly,
Moving faster every single month, where will these physical constraints actually hit a breaking point?
will states eventually have to choose between allocating water to their citizens' taps or allocating it to their artificial intelligence?
Will water-scarce regions find themselves completely excluded from the AI revolution?
And what happens if the water itself becomes more valuable than the data it helps process?
The physical layer cannot be
You
bypassed.
truly cannot.
Take some time to think about the physical drops of water behind your next digital prompt. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.